When it comes to the best-selling flavors of potato chips in the United States, the big four consists of plain, sour cream and onion, barbecue, and salt and vinegar. But is there some background to what makes each one a crowd favorite? Let's find out. Living in the US, we often take our favorite potato chip flavors for granted, not realizing just how unique or arbitrary they really are. While we munch on plain, sour cream and onion, barbecue, and salt and vinegar, folks in other countries have their own flavor favorites, like the pepper-flavored chips in Holland and the shrimp-flavored chips in a lot of areas in Asia. Believe it or not, there was a time in America when companies tried to push peanut butter-flavored chips. Before we talk about these fascinating chip flavors, let's take a step back and explore the history of potato chips. Potatoes are indigenous to the United States, with wild varieties mostly found in the southern half of the country. It was in Latin and South America where they were first cultivated as a versatile food source by native peoples. The Spanish brought potatoes to Europe in the late 16th century, but they quickly became associated with peasants and were looked down upon by the elite. The saying, "only the wretched eat the roots," was common at the time. However, in the democratic United States, potatoes were widely embraced, especially by Irish immigrants, who helped make potatoes a mainstream American food by the 19th century. Potatoes became so popular in the US that they were even served at some of the country's fanciest restaurants, like Moon's Lake House in Saratoga Springs, New York. There's a famous story about this place and its snotty cook who hated customers sending back food. And then one day in 1853, the great railroad tycoon Cornelius Vanderbilt tried to send back a potato dish he thought was undercooked. The chef, infuriated, decided to make the most repulsive potato abomination he could muster. But instead of a disaster, he ended up creating potato chips, and everyone loved them. Now, there isn't much hard evidence that this story is true. Regardless, Saratoga chips, as they were first known, quickly spread to restaurants and stores across New York, and then to Ohio and Pennsylvania, regions now considered the potato chip belt of America because of their chip-loving culture. Much like candy, potato chips really took off in the early 20th century. The late Industrial Revolution brought machines that could process, peel, and fry potatoes on a massive scale. Chips were then sealed in little bags of wax paper or foil and sold individually in stores. Before this, you had to buy chips in bulk, like nuts. Nationwide food brands didn't emerge until after World War II, but by then, potato chips had already become a beloved American snack. A lot of the big iconic companies we know today are the result of savvy entrepreneurs buying up smaller regional businesses. This was definitely true for potato chips. Throughout the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, Frito and Lay went on a buying spree, acquiring small chip companies across the US. In 1961, they merged to form the giant chip conglomerate Frito-Lay, which then merged with Pepsi in 1965. Today, Frito-Lay produces over 60% of all chips sold in America. The second big company came in 1956 when a chemist at Procter & Gamble developed a uniform, saddle-shaped chip that could be stacked in a cylinder and sealed. Initially, these chips tasted terrible, so the idea was shelved for a decade. When revisited, the recipe was improved, resulting in Pringles' newfangled potato chips. However, since they were made from a potato-based dough, they didn't qualify as traditional potato chips. The FDA required them to be labeled as potato chips made from dried potatoes. Instead, they followed the British lead and called them potato crisps, though most people today just call them Pringles. Sometimes I wonder why onion flavor. Onions originated in the Far East and were brought to Europe by the Romans. Much like potatoes, onions were easy to grow and, as a result, were looked down upon by the European elite, especially in Northern Europe. In England, from the 17th century onwards, onions were considered a low-class food. People who ate a lot of onions and smelled like them were thought to be repulsive. There was even a belief that the pungent taste of onions could make you violent or overly amorous. However, in Southern Europe, the story was different. The Spanish, Greeks, and Italians all ate a lot of onions. The British used this as evidence of their own moral superiority. The British poet Percy Shelley, visiting France in the early 1800s, was shocked to find that even Parisian aristocrats ate onions. In America, this kind of snobbery didn't take hold. The US welcomed many immigrants from onion-eating parts of Europe in the late 19th century, which helped normalize both eating and growing onions. One popular dish that caught on with middle-class America was onion soup. This acceptance of onions laid the groundwork for one of the most beloved potato chip flavors, sour cream and onion. Barbecue, on the other hand, is deeply rooted in ancient American traditions, with its name originating from the Taino Indians of the Caribbean, meaning a rack for smoking meat. Early European settlers in the Americas were captivated by the indigenous methods of outdoor meat cooking and sought to replicate them, making barbecue an early example of cultural exchange or appropriation, depending on the perspective. Since its inception, barbecues have been celebrated with grand gatherings where vast quantities of beef, pork, and chicken were cooked over open flames. Even George Washington was known to attend such events. Similar to onions and potatoes, barbecues became a great equalizer among Americans of all social strata, with one notable exception. As wealthier Americans in the South began delegating cooking responsibilities to enslaved individuals, barbecue preparations became closely associated with African Americans. After World War II, American socializing around barbecues transitioned from public gatherings to private backyard affairs. Owning a personal charcoal or propane grill, or even a stone barbecue pit, became a symbol of prosperity and comfort among the burgeoning post-war middle class. The meats grilled during this golden age often included factory-made hamburger patties and hot dogs, replacing the traditional ribs and steaks of earlier barbecues. To simplify the process further, supermarkets began offering ready-made barbecue sauces, epitomized by products like the popular Kraft barbecue sauce. This sauce, mildly tangy with tomatoes and molasses but notably sweeter than its southern predecessors, quickly became a staple on backyard grills across America. Despite its widespread popularity, some purists in the barbecue world still disdain supermarket sauces, viewing them similarly to how authentic Mexican cuisine enthusiasts might regard fast food chains. As much as Americans enjoyed their salty potato chips, there came a point when mere plain chips started to feel a bit monotonous. Responding to this demand, Lay's introduced barbecue sauce-flavored potato chips in 1958 during the height of the middle-class barbecue craze. As for vinegar, it's essentially fermented alcohol that has turned sour. The English word vinegar derives from the French vinaigre, meaning sour wine, reflecting its origins and flavor profile. When alcohol is exposed to oxygen over time, it undergoes a transformation into a sour acid known as vinegar. This process has made vinegar one of the oldest and most ubiquitous food ingredients in human history, found in some form across nearly every culture that has produced alcohol. In times before widespread availability of spices and sugar, vinegar was prized for its ability to enhance flavor in food. Like many early condiments, vinegar also served to mask the sometimes less than pleasant tastes of historic dishes. The English, who famously held a disdain for onions, favored a vinegar made from malt ale as a popular seasoning. It became particularly associated with topping deep-fried fish and French fries, which became staples of the British diet in the 19th century. As British immigration to the United States declined in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, a smaller but still notable number of Brits continued to arrive, increasingly identifying as exotic foreigners due to the evolving cultural differences between the two nations since the American Revolution. This cultural exchange saw the rise of British pubs as ethnic restaurants in America's diverse culinary landscape, introducing American diners to traditional British fare such as fish and chips, accompanied by vinegar. The popularity of fish and chips in post-war America, along with the association of vinegar with salted potato products, laid the groundwork for the introduction of salt and vinegar-flavored potato chips. Unlike their British counterparts who traditionally added vinegar to their fries, Americans embraced the simulated flavor of salt and vinegar chips more readily while finding the practice of vinegar on fries foreign. Over time, each flavor of plain, sour cream and onion, barbecue, and salt and vinegar has come to tell a unique story of America's dynamic cultural evolution as a nation. What other chip flavors have you tasted or tried? Share them below and leave a thumbs up if you enjoyed watching this video. Subscribe for more.